Developing competent, diverse workforces, responsibly managing the finances of a business, and implementing policies that promote a functional public sector are at the heart of a thriving economy. At the University of Pretoria's Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, we pride ourselves on producing resilient graduates who do this and more by working towards creating value in the market as well as government institutions. The faculty is home to 8 departments, a school and 2 institutes which focus on management sciences, economics, financial sciences, and public management and administration. These are supported by technologically advanced learning systems and acclaimed lecturers, some of whom are international. With more than 70 postgraduate programs and an established track record of impactful research, we enjoy long-standing industry partnerships and associations with several reputable institutes and companies. We are regarded amongst the world's top economic and management sciences faculties, boasting a number of academics who are rated by the National Research Foundation. This has been further cemented by our successful alumni, employed in top positions in government and companies, with many running successful enterprises across the globe. At UP's Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences, we develop innovative, responsible leaders that create value and make an impact on society.
Good afternoon. I'm Oliver Null, the Head of the Department of Human Resource Management. Welcome to the webinar Positive Psychology at Work, Taking Advantage of Your Psychological Strengths. After this short welcome, Dr. Daphne Pillay-Naidu will make the introduction to the topic. At the Department of Human Resource Management, we pride ourselves on having seasoned researchers in the field of IUP, industrial psychology, human resource management, and labor relations. Currently, we have 7 NRF-rated researchers who have established themselves in their respective research areas. With Society 5.0 and the 4th Industrial Revolution, and with COVID-19, and now the post-pandemic context, employees and employers need to navigate through vast complexities in their workspaces, and we all aim to try to make collective sense of these complexities. In our department, our research focuses on specific areas to answer some of these questions. Some academics focus on the nature of work-life balance, career agility, professional identity, psychological contract, employee engagement, and seeking a deeper understanding of the employee experiences in a post-pandemic workplace. With that, the effect of factors amongst others, technology, unemployment, diversity, social identities, and personal resources like resilience on those concepts are also explored. With companies moving away from traditional forms of work, new reconstructed knowledge about transformation and diversity, building an inclusive culture and climate, the way we lead, and talent management are at the forefront of our research agenda. Also now, as we saw in the last few years, enhancing and sustaining the health and well-being of students, employees, and employers are extremely important to deal with these complexities. This reinforces the importance of having discussions like we are having today in the next hour. I wish to introduce the facilitator and panel of today's discussion, Dr. Daphne Pillay-Naidu, who is facilitating today's discussion. Before I do that, I just want to give a short discussion just about their backgrounds, about the panel members who's going to follow the discussion today. First, we have Dr. Daphne Pillay-Naidu, who is a senior lecturer in the department, and also is currently the program manager for the BCom Honours Human Resource Management and Labour Relations. She's a registered industrial psychologist with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. Her research focus areas include female leadership, positive organizational behavior, and also psychological strengths in the workplace. Then we also have Dr. Martha Haruna-Famwe, who is a senior lecturer in the department, and she's also the program manager for the Human Resource Management and Labour Relations Master's program. Her current research interests are broadly premised on positive psychology, specifically focusing on employees and how they use these psychological resources to buffer the effects of work challenges, including burnout, techno-stress, and other negative aspects of work. She's also a registered psychologist with the Health Professions Council. Then we have Professor Chantal Olkers, who's an associate professor in the department. She's also the program manager for the undergraduate programs we have in human resource management. She's also a registered industrial psychologist and is currently also a C2 NOF rated researcher. She also focuses on positive psychology constructs such as well-being, grit, and work engagement. It's now my privilege just to introduce to you Dr. Pillai Naidu, who's going to facilitate today's session.
What are psychological strengths? And more importantly, how can you use them to help you cope in the workplace? Well, these are some of the questions that my colleagues and I will attempt to answer in this webinar. Once again, a warm welcome to you, and thank you for affording us the opportunity to share some of our research on psychological strengths with you. Before we start, I would like to give you an introduction into psychological strengths. Psychological strengths emanates from the school of positive psychology. But what exactly is positive psychology? Typically, in psychology, there is a concerted effort on alleviating or minimizing negative factors. There are possibly thousands or even tens of thousands of studies that focus on minimizing work stress or reducing the experience of burnout. Ultimately, the focus seems to be on how we can reduce negative work-related outcomes or on how we can minimize our weaknesses. The positive psychology school of thought kind of flips that idea around and argues that instead of being fixated on your deficiencies or focusing your energy on alleviating negative work-related outcomes like stress or burnout, you should actually be focusing on conditions and processes that contribute to human flourishing or optimal human functioning. Let's think about this for a second. Even as human beings, we are so conditioned to direct all of our energy towards minimizing our weaknesses instead of investing in our strengths. In actual fact, research indicates that minimizing our weaknesses can only prevent you from failing, but it cannot result in you fully harnessing your true potential and flourishing in the ever-changing workplace. In order for you to flourish, it is important that you identify and nurture your psychological strength. So we have about 60 minutes with you today. And while we certainly cannot explore all of the psychological strengths out there, we will focus on the psychological strengths that we have researched the most and talk about how you can identify your strengths and, more importantly, how you can nurture and grow your strengths to help you flourish in the workplace. So as Prof. Nell has mentioned, I will now be introducing our panel. First, we will hear from Prof. Chantal Olkers, who is going to introduce us to the psychological strength of grit. Then, Dr. Martha Harunavamwe will share her research on psychological capital with us. After that, I will be back with you to talk about character strengths and the role they play in the work context. In the final segment of this webinar, our panel will participate in an open discussion where we talk about developing and applying your psychological strengths. We will also be taking some of your questions during this segment. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy the discussion while we welcome Prof. Olkers to the floor.
I would like to start with a quotation of one of our former presidents, Mr. Nelson Mandela, who said, "The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." And that brings me to the question, why is it possible that some people just have the ability to rise again? They can stand up despite the challenges and setbacks that they are facing, and they have the stamina to keep on moving forward to achieve their personal goals. They have grit and I would like to spell it G-R-I-T. Grit can be seen as a personal resource describing a personal characteristic, a condition or an energy that support the attainment of work and life goals. To have grit means that you can stay focused, that you are dedicated to achieving long-term goals despite obstacles and adversity. Grit is a non-cognitive psychological construct and signature strength that originally comprises two components. There's the consistency of interest in long-term goals that has to do with the passion one has for one's work or one's studies. And then there's the perseverance of effort exerted in achieving these goals. Perseverance of effort focuses on sustained, enduring effort or continued activity one exerts over time in achieving one's goals despite setbacks, failures, or proverbial roadblocks. Recently, a third component was added: adaptability to situations or environmental agility, which refers to the extent towards which can actively adapt to changing environment. Grit is thus the spark that ignites passion, tenacity, and perseverance. It encourages individuals to achieve long-term professional goals, especially when they become challenging. I would like to introduce my colleague, Martha, who will tell us more about psychological ownership.
I'm going to take you back to the context of the workplace that we're operating under. You would agree with me that our workplace today have become increasingly fast-paced, with complex and multiple demands, which brings a great challenge to employees to deliver consistent business results, whilst trying to maintain positive levels of mental well-being. The two things that are important to the organization, our mental well-being and our performance. I'm going to introduce a construct that will help the organizations to achieve both the mental well-being and the performance. It is psychological capital, or passionately known as PsyCap. So what is PsyCap? Psychological capital is a positive psychological state of development that is characterized by 4 components, which include hope, optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience. And these components are referred to as psychological capacities or psychological resources that individuals can use to buffer the effects of complex job demands. So when we encounter those challenges in the work environment and we have adequate hope, self-efficacy, resilience, and we also have the optimism, we are more likely to be able to buffer the effects of the complex job demands. I'm going to go through the components one by one. Let's start with the component of hope. What is hope all about? So when you look at the concept hope, it refers to us persevering towards a specific goal, and when it is necessary, redirecting our efforts towards achieving a specific goal. Then when we look at the second component, which is self-efficacy, what is self-efficacy all about? It's all about the confidence that you have about achieving a challenging role in your job. So how do we achieve this on a daily basis? When we encounter those demands that we feel are complex, we need the self-efficacy. We need the confidence to be able to overcome those challenges. Then our component number 3 is resilience. Resilience is the capacity that we have to bounce back after facing adversities, after facing the challenges in the workplace. Do we have the capacity to bounce back and do something that will help us to succeed and even flourish better? Then the last component is optimism. What is it all about? So when we talk about optimism, we always talk about it in relation with pessimism. So optimism is making a positive attribution towards achieving something that is so challenging, something that is so difficult for you to achieve, but having the positive attribution that if I put a lot of effort, I'll be able to achieve this particular goal. So those are the components that makes up psychological capital. And one thing that I like about psychological capital is that the researchers do agree that the PsyCap construct as a construct is greater than the sum of its components. So every time when we look at psychological capital, we should not look at its components only, but we should look at it as a higher order construct and a core construct for well-being and performance. Another good news for you about psychological capital is that it is positively associated with work performance. It is also positively associated with well-being, and it is positively associated with work and job satisfaction. And the good thing is that it is negatively associated with our worst enemy, burnout and depression. So psychological capital provide us with a lot of resources that we can tap into on daily basis and help us to buffer the effects of all the challenges that we go through on daily basis. I'm going to introduce to you again to Daphne to look at the individual strengths and characteristics.
It is my pleasure to be back with you again. Today, I would like to use this opportunity to talk to you about character strengths. In their effort to classify character strengths, Martin Seligman and Christopher Peterson, two pioneers of character strengths research, define character strengths as positive traits of the individual that is typically reflected in their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Because they emphasize positive aspects or positive traits of the individual, character strengths can contribute significantly to the individual's fulfillment, flourishing, and thriving if they are identified and used correctly. So what are the different character strengths that exist? In order for you to understand how the various character strengths came about, we need to understand the concept of virtues. Virtues can be defined as broader categories of human qualities that enable an individual to achieve optimal human functioning. Through their work, Peterson and Seligman argued that virtues could actually be seen as the mechanisms through which character strengths emerge. That is, virtues give rise to character strength. Using their research, Peterson and Seligman formulated the Values in Action Inventory, or the VIA, which is a psychological assessment tool designed to identify the individual character profile. The VIA inventory identifies the following 6 virtues and 24 character strengths. From the virtue of wisdom and knowledge, we have cognitive strengths that entail the acquisition and use of knowledge. These cognitive strengths include creativity, curiosity, judgment, love of learning, and perspective. From the virtue of courage, we have emotional strengths that involves the exercise of will to accomplish the goals in the face of opposition, both internal or external. These emotional strengths include bravery, perseverance, honesty, and zest. From the virtue of humanity, we have interpersonal skills. These involve skills looking at tending and befriending others. These strengths include love, kindness, and social intelligence. From the virtue of justice, which emphasizes civic strengths, we have values or strengths that underlie healthy community life. These include teamwork, fairness, and leadership. From the virtue of temperance, we have strengths that protect us against excess or too much of something. These character strengths include forgiveness, modesty, prudence, and self-regulation. And finally, from the virtue of transcendence, we have strengths that emphasize forging connections to the larger universe and provide meaning for us in life. These strengths include the strengths of appreciation of beauty and excellence, gratitude, hope, humor, and spirituality. So those are the 24 character strengths. What is important to remember is that these character strengths exist in varying degrees, and they can be measured as individual differences. For example, an individual will possess all of these character strengths, but to varying degrees. Some strengths may be possessed to a lesser degree, and it may not be visible through our thoughts, behaviors, or feelings. Other strengths may feature more prominently in the individual, and they may be clearly visible through our actions and emotions. These stronger strengths are a reflection of your identity, that is, your best qualities or your character strength, and we refer to them as your signature strengths. Signature strengths are strengths that you own, celebrate, and frequently exercise. For example, people will often say, "I'm a very honest person," or "I'm a very fair person." And we then see this honesty and fairness come through in their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. When we are able to identify and use our signature strengths, we become intrinsically motivated. And this results in the experience of positive emotions, excitement, and invigoration, which promotes flourishing and thriving. Now that you've been given a crash course on character strengths, the bigger question is, how can these strengths help you in the workplace? Well, there are several peer-reviewed research studies that highlight the role of character strength and its effect on positive work-related outcomes. It is important to note that different character strengths are needed for different work-related outcomes. For example, studies have indicated that the strength of modesty decrease counterproductive work behavior. The character strengths of zest, teamwork, and social intelligence were important predictors for in-role and extra-role job performance. Hope and zest are associated with job performance, increased productivity, as well as low turnover rate. The character strengths of curiosity, zest, hope, gratitude, and spirituality are associated with job satisfaction, and zest is associated with both greater life and work satisfaction. In general, the findings tend to indicate that when a person's character strengths fit well with their work environment, they can enhance positive work-related outcomes such as work domain well-being or job performance. So now that we have given you a basic discussion into the various psychological strengths, we will head on over to our panel discussion, where we will focus on how to identify, build, and apply these strengths at work. Thank you. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us thus far. Now we will hear from our panel on the practical application of psychological strengths. Before we do that, I would like to encourage you to use your chat box on whatever social media platform you are to ask questions and introduce comments for the panel. We will be taking your questions at the end of the session. So, back to the practical application of our psychological strengths. Chantal, let's begin with you. You mentioned earlier that grit consists of two main dimensions, that is the perseverance of efforts and the consistency of interest. what relevance does grit have for the workplace?
Daphne, grit is not only linked to optimal academic, career and performance outcomes, but research has also shown that gritty individuals are more engaged, they are motivated, they are happier, they are healthier and more successful than those with lower levels of grit. Further, grit has also shown to result in various team, family, organizational and societal outcomes. For example, gritty students perform better in both high school and university courses. They show higher academic throughput rates and they are more committed to their educational goals. Gritty individuals are more committed to their relationships. They achieve greater career successes. They are more likely to complete their personal and their professional goals. They are also more engaged at work and they also report higher levels of psychological well-being. And when a task is challenging, gritty individuals not only push themselves, but also the members of the team to achieve these goals. So gritty people do not just outperform because they invest more effort in their work and training. They actually can persevere in tedious and frustrating behaviors. Employees with higher grit levels are more likely to perform because they are better prepared to use the strengths to complete tasks, they are less influenced by setbacks, and they invest sustained energy in achieving goals. And I think just if we compare to some other constructs that's also related to performance, unlike a trait like personal resources, like for example self-control, conscientiousness, and self-regulation, grit does not merely aid in resisting short-term temptations or setbacks, but it rather aids in individuals to persist in their efforts and to endure challenges over a much more longer period of time.
So, since grit plays such an integral role in sustained job performance, how can one go about developing or strengthening their grit?
I think generally in terms of the research also, we realize that sometimes we say that grit is largely regarded as an unchanging personality trait. Can we ever change it? But research in brain development and neuroscience and also personal resources have indicated that grit is actually malleable and that it is teachable throughout the lifespan. So there are actually various interventions for the cognitive, the behavioral, as well as the emotional domains of grit. If I can just start with maybe some intervention strategies for the cognitive domain of grit, grit can be taught. So as a way to effectively teach the practice of grit, we can make use of role models or self-reflection exercises on one's own experiences of grit. So if we look at the student environment, student can be asked to actively use their experiences of achieving successes or even overcoming their failures and solidify what they have learned through tasks that allow them to practice grit themselves. Then, of course, we can also reflect on past failures, because considering that grit is your ability to continue towards one's goals despite adversity, grit can be promoted by helping one's process of overcoming these failures. So if one, for example, reflect on the experiences of failure, it can also help to promote grit, especially if you make use of constructive failure. Where failure can actually bring about positive outcomes. I think another aspect that's also important is that we need to cultivate a growth mindset regarding our capabilities. We need to believe that our abilities can change and improve with effort. So with a growth mindset, for example, we can choose to replace the word fail with learn and say, I have learned instead of I have failed. So to focus on the process rather than the outcome. And a growth mindset is also closely related to hope, one of the sub-dimensions of psychological capital that Marsha has mentioned, the belief that you can change for the better. A last intervention here in terms of the cognitive domain of grit has to do with goal setting. Of course, remember, goal setting is a starting point in the development of grit. Grit building can begin by setting goals within the time perspective one can see. So, for example, if we like to enhance grit within our children, we can do it in a daily, in a weekly, in a monthly basis, even for ourselves, to see, okay, these are the goals that have been set, and to see how we actually progress through those goals. So it's very important that we understand why the goals are needed, how the goals are set and expressed, and also that we also have specific action plans to achieve the goals. And we can also anticipate and overcome those barriers in achieving goals. If I can just briefly touch on the intervention strategies for the behavioral domains of grit, it can actually promote brain development, increase development practices, and preventing the overuse of media. And maybe I can just elaborate on that. So, for example, you are an athlete and you are preparing for a marathon. On a daily basis, you practice and you exercise. So, therefore, it is very important that we actually increase deliberate practice behavior in order to promote grit. So, you need to engage in activities that are designed to maximize the improvement of your current skills. So, you need to exerting consistent and also repetitive effort toward deliberate practice, which is a main mechanism through which grit develops. So it's a matter of use it or you lose it. So the more grit exercises activities are done, the more your grit will be strengthened. And I think another interesting one that was shown by research is, of course, excessive of overuse of media. So that is one of the behaviors that we need to have a look at that could interfere with grit development. Now I'm talking about the use of smartphones and internet gaming. So research have shown, for example, that excessive media overuse are impairing brain development in adults. And specifically, if we look at the area of executive functioning of the brain, that could negatively impact on grit performance. So it can decrease your self-control or lower your working memory performance. So we need to prevent the overuse of media. So those that you have kids, beware. Maybe you actually need to keep an eye on the amount of time that actually have been spent on internet gaming. Then in the last place, if we can actually have a look at the interventions in the emotional domain of grit, grit is closely related to emotion states, and therefore emotional regulation ability is very important. So we need to overcome our negative emotions, such as stress and frustrations, in the process of exercising grit. And it's very important that we need to take part in mindfulness-based stress reduction programs and resilience enhancement courses. I think that Martha will also mention that's important to develop your psychological capital. And then just the last comment here in terms of your interest discovery and maintenance. We need to promote interest discovery through flow experiences. So to build your interest, it is important to accumulate positive emotional experiences in the area of the interest, because remember, that is your passion, and then also having the necessary support from your peers, your teachers, or your parents in that regard.
Good. I think what particularly stands out to me is that all of these interventions that you spoke about are actually quite practical, and they're practical to the point where the everyday employee can just restructure their workday to kind of fit them in. For example, you spoke about goal setting. It's quite easy to use that technique in your everyday work. So I think the interventions are very flexible in that sense, which is quite good. Okay, so let's go over to Martha. Martha, you mentioned psychological capital, and you spoke about the 4 dimensions. That's hope, optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience. Can you tell us what value do these dimensions have for the changing workplace, and how can they actually help an employee manage transitions?
Thank you so much, Daphne, and thank you, Prof. Orcas, for elaborating a lot on grit. And you actually realize that some of the resources that I mentioned are like grit as well, because if we look at the aspect of resilience, it talks a lot about enduring or being able to bounce back after facing a challenge. And I'm going to take you back to our context at the moment. We are still recovering from COVID-19, and you agree with me that work is no longer the same. It's the same as it used to be. We find ourselves with complex job demands. There is a lot of ambiguity on what we are expected to do on a daily basis. So when we have hope, when you have resilience, and when you are self-efficacious, you are more likely to be able to adjust to the environment that is so complex. Because individuals that have high levels of hope, individuals that are self-efficacious, they can navigate the environment better because they can actually create their own personal resources, and that enable them to navigate the environment far better than somebody who doesn't have those resources. So PsyCap on its own has an enduring, it has an enduring effect on the mental well-being and performance. So individuals who use the resources, the PsyCap resources on daily basis, are more likely to be able to buffer the effects of job demands that they are exposed to. So you see individuals with high levels of PsyCap, they have got 3 unique characteristics that they have that are slightly different from those who don't have the resources. And number 1 is that they can generate multiple solutions to problems. So you would agree with me that the workplace now is characterized by problems, and you need those solutions on daily basis. So the higher your psychological capital is, the more likely you are to generate those multiple solutions to the problems that you encounter on daily basis. Then number 2, they have a positive expectation about the results. So let's say we are waiting for something to come out, or we are expecting something to come. The individuals that are high in PsyCap are optimistic. They look at the future and all they see is something bright, rather than sobbing around and getting stressed about what's going to happen. Individuals high in psychological capital have positive expectations, and those positive expectations actually help them to respond better to challenges compared to individuals with low psychological capital. So number 3, another characteristic for individuals with high levels of PsyCap is that they respond well and they respond positively to setbacks. Believe you me, every day we have setbacks, we have challenges that we encounter in the workplace, and we need to pull ourselves together, come up and do something better. So those who have high psychological capital respond positively to setbacks because their resilience is very high. Because their resilience is very high, they have the capacity to bounce back when they encounter those adversities, and they actually come back stronger than before. So that's something that we should take note of. So in a dynamic and challenging VUCA environment, with the complex and ambiguous job demands, as I have alluded to, we see employees who are hopeful, those who are self-efficacious, those who are optimistic, and those who are resilient. They are more likely to weather the storm better compared to those individuals that might be struggling with their own personal resources, those that are pessimistic, or those that have low levels of resilience. So I think, in short, that's what I can say are the benefits of these personal resources, and managers should try to tap into those resources so that they actually get better results from employees.
Thank you, Martha. I think what is interesting is we quite often talk about the start of COVID, where we had to make the transition to work from home and change the way of working with remote working. There's little conversation on the fact that we now need to readjust to coming back to the office and make that new transition. So I think it's very useful to know that there are psychological strengths that we have within us that we can use to help manage that transition. So speaking of psychological strengths within us, I know from my research that organizational culture plays an important role in providing you with the opportunity to strengthen your psychological capital. If the organizational culture does not provide you with that opportunity or is not conducive to you strengthening your PsyCap, what individual level interventions can the employee use on their own, Martha?
So you would agree with me that most people watch a lot of YouTube videos on motivational speeches. There are different apps available. We have Happify, and I've seen people using that to try to improve their emotions. Then we also have people listening to inspirational speeches from different individuals. And we also have people looking at positive video games that they use on daily basis. But one thing that I like about psychological capital is that it is malleable. It can be assessed, it can be developed, and it can actually be sustained through focused facilitated learning or through deliberate practice within the organization. But in the event that the managers and the leaders are not buying in and are not allowing individuals or are not creating an environment for people to improve their psychological capital, then I think individuals can focus on developing all the psychological capital resources, starting with each resource on its own. For example, when you want to increase your hope, you want to be somebody who is more hopeful. So it is advised that you set your goals in such a way that they are as clear as possible. I think we talk a lot about SMART goals. So you set your goals in such a way that they are clear, and then you identify current state. What exactly, where are you as an individual, and what is it that you want to achieve maybe in the next few months or few years? Then you need to determine what is the desired state, then create the pathway to get there. Hope kind of create for you the pathway. How am I going to get to the desired state? So you set your goals clearly, then you define those goals, then you need to understand where are you heading to as an individual. Then number two, you can also focus on developing your self-efficacy. And there are two ingredients to self-efficacy, and those include examining what needs to be done and then examining your capability to do what needs to be done. Am I capable of doing this? And when we speak of efficacy, we are speaking about your confidence. So it is up to you to actually say, I can do it. And it says the moment you say, I can do it, you're halfway there already. So you will definitely achieve your goals. So know your capability, know those things that you want to do to achieve that particular objective. Then the next thing is you need to focus on the past success. When you build your confidence, focus on those things that you have done in the past that were successful. And this is also referred to as the master of experience. And we're not saying ignore the failures, but we're saying focus on what you have done successfully, because that is going to give you more confidence to keep pushing forward. Then there's another way you can actually improve your self-efficacy as well, which is modeling, social modeling. You know, we have so many successful people around us that we can look up to. It is very important sometimes to copy what others have done in the past. If this individual managed to achieve this particular goal that I also want to achieve today, what were the steps that they took to get to that particular state? So you look at those people that inspire you, you model them, and you find yourself achieving those goals that you think are very difficult. Then finally, it is very important to reframe negative experience. Change the mindset completely, because sometimes it is the mindset that actually stand between our goals and the achievement of those goals. So it is very important that you reframe your mindset, and I'll emphasize on this. Look at the positive part of the things that you have done in the past that will encourage you better. Then you can also navigate psychological capital by improving your optimism. Remember, we said optimism is all about you being able to have a positive, looking at things in a positive way and seeing that you are going to succeed now and in future. So the first thing when you develop your optimism is that accept the past. We need to accept the past, and we need to appreciate the moment and view the future as a source of opportunity. Let's look at the future as a future that is bright, as a future that has a lot to offer us as employees. So if it is a promotion or if it is something that you want to achieve in future, let's look at all the challenges we face as opportunities that we can actually use to achieve the goals that we are looking forward to achieve in future. Then lastly, you can also look at the resilience as a resource, and you can also try to develop your resilience. So when we look at resilience, we basically look at it as a way or as our capacity to bounce back from adversity. And like I've mentioned earlier on, adversities are always there. Challenges will always come in the workplace, and we'll always encounter those problems. So we need to find ways to move on and to put behind those setbacks and flourish. So our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time that we fall. So that capability to rise when you fall is very important. If you don't have the capacity to rise when you fall, then that's when people say you have failed. But when you rise after falling, then we praise and we say you are a resilient individual. So how do we rise after falling? Number one, we need to face the reality. We don't need to avoid the problems. Challenges are there, and they will always be there. So we need to face reality, accept the reality as it is, then endure the hardships. Then the next thing that we also need to do is, when you are in the middle of those challenges or those adversities, we need to search for meaning. Why is this happening, and how can I actually use it as an opportunity for me to bounce back? Then we also need to improvise. It's very important to come up with other new ways of reaching your goals, because there are certain things that you can clearly see that this is proving to be very difficult. So can I improvise? Can I come up with another way of achieving this particular goal, or should I keep trying where I see that I'm not actually getting the results that I'm looking for? So I think basically that's how you can navigate that as an individual, even if you're operating in a culture that does not foster psychological capital.
Martha, I just would like to create a link of, you spoke about resilience, and I think about the link between grit and the resilience. And I think the application of grit implies more a inclination toward resilience. So grit is not just having resilience in the face of failure, but it's having a more deep commitments that remain loyal over a period of time. Now, so like PsyCap has value and that can benefit the employee in the workplace, character strengths and virtues also play a very important role. So maybe, Daphne, you can tell us a little bit more about specifically how our signature strengths and the resources that each of us already possesses, how can we actually go about identifying those?
Yeah, so I think obviously the main aspect in using your character strengths is being able to identify them. So I'm going to talk quickly about 4 ways that you can do that, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. So the first way is the least complicated, and I spoke about it earlier, and that is the values and action inventory. It is a psychological assessment tool that is available on the VIA Institute of Character website, and it's free to take the assessment. It takes about 20 minutes, and the assessment plays a very important role in helping you identify your best qualities or your signature strengths. So that's the assessment for you. Other more practical ways or activities that I can recommend comes in the form of character strengths interventions. So character strength interventions and the workplace really emphasize practical activities that we can use in our everyday work life. The first one they make reference to is strength spotting. And strength spotting is an activity in which the employee plays a very integral role. So when we engage in the process of strength spotting, the individual must think about a time in their career where they were functioning at the best versions of themselves. So this could mean, when they were the most happiest or the most fulfilled or the most successful. When you think back to that time, try and identify if there's any character strengths that stood out that you used during that time. For example, it could mean that you had to be disciplined, which means that the character strengths of self-regulation was coming in quite strongly. The second way that you can do that is to focus on someone who gets you. So quite often, we will have our co-workers, our colleagues, and our superiors who complement the way we do things. And sometimes in those compliments, they actually pick up on character strengths that we were not able to pick up on. We always find that sometimes, while we can't identify our own signature strengths, people outside are in a better position to do so because they see us and they see it through our acting, our thinking, and our behavior. And then the last technique that I can talk about is monitoring ourselves. So how do we go about monitoring the way we do things in the workday? So choose just an ordinary workday and set an alarm. So when the alarm goes off after an hour, ask yourself, what character strength was I actually using? And ask yourself, did the character strength actually, influence me or impact me negatively or positively? You'll find when you keep journaling these experiences, there'll be certain character strengths that stand out, and those are most likely your signature strengths. Okay, so let's take some audiences or some questions from the audience. So to Chantel, the first question. Do you think that work environments should be results and performance driven, or only despite challenges and not focus on promoting a motivating environment that shows kindness?
I think definitely both is important. I think unfortunately we always measure performance in terms of certain KPIs that needs to be met. But I think we should never actually forget the kindness that actually also plays a role there, and that there are certain factors. I think as industrial psychologists that's interested in the well-being and the flourishing of our employees, I think can play a very important role here to actually look at those kind of aspects and address those maybe factors that can impact the performance of our employees.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I agree. Being the industrial psychologist that I am, I agree with you as well. Okay, the next question I'm going to ask to Martha. When setting goals, is it advisable to be conservative and set targets that have a high probability of being attained? What if you set extreme goals and you just never achieve consistency?
All right, so we are going to reflect back to the issue of hope that we talked a lot about setting goals. And I did emphasize that we need to set smart goals. Goals should be achievable, because the more we set goals that are difficult to achieve, the more we start feeling that we are not good enough. So let's set goals that we can achieve, that are achievable, not too easy, not too difficult, but let the goals be achievable. You look at the resources that you have available. Are these resources going to help me to be able to achieve the goal or not? And if those resources can be developed, it is advisable that you find means and ways to develop those goals. And I'm going to reflect back on hope again. Hope provides us with pathways. There's always a way to improvise. There's always a way to try to figure out how you can actually boost your maybe your resources or your capacities as an individual to make sure that you can achieve even more goals. So it is important for us to set smart goals. Let those goals be achievable. I would not discourage you from setting difficult goals, but I would advise that let's look at, do an assessment of the resources that you have available, including your capacitors, and see if the goal that you're setting is achievable. Again, you need to look at individuals around you, your colleagues, and those people that you look up to. Social modeling, it can also help to actually achieve those goals. If somebody managed to achieve the goal, you can also achieve the same goal.
I think just to add to that, I think, Martha, that's why self-awareness and self-reflection are so important concepts to continuously be working on. Because if you are self-aware, you would know the capacity you have and you would know the goals that you are able to accomplish. So the next question, and I think the last question that we're going to take is for Martha, and it deals with psychological capital, and it's quite nicely put. So it says, is there such a thing as psychological liability? How would you deal with individuals who seem to suck the little capital that you have left out of you?
So that's quite interesting. It says the happier we are, the more productive we are, and the more we generate more resources. So I'm thinking of an individual. We have a wide range of resources, and I mean personal resources. So the more people suck those resources out of you, the more you are capable of generating new resources. Remember, you are hopeful, you are optimistic, you are resilient. So there will be no way you say that my reservoir for the resources is done, is finished. So the more they suck them, the more you generate more. Theory actually says that individuals, we have a wide range of resources. You have the capacity to generate new resources. And the more the environment becomes more challenging, the more they become even more resilient to actually generate other pathways or to generate new ways of dealing with the problems that they face. But I think I'm going to throw the question to Prof. Olkers as well, because she has done a lot on grit, and it talks more about how you can persevere for a longer period of time. So I think in the event that people are actually sucking the resources out of you, what happens? Don't we use then grit in order for us to persevere?
Of course, I think, Martha, we should never forget that, remember, grit is about your long-term goal that we would like to achieve. And I think something that's important that you said about setting those specific goals is that we actually need to look at, if I can use the word, setting smaller type of goals that's achievable, and to actually make use of those. And I think another thing that's very important is that we actually make it maybe visible. I think sometimes what helps if you actually put them on a chart and you actually can see that, and you can actually go back to those goals that actually have been set, that you will be able to proceed and that you will be able to achieve those.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of psychological strength. So as much as you utilize it and expend it, because it occurs internally, you still have the ability to nurture it and continuously grow your psychological strength. So, well, we could possibly speak about psychological strengths all day long. We have unfortunately reached the end of our allocated time. We do hope that you have enjoyed this session. From me and my fellow panel members, thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.